Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Environmental with Dandelion. This is our podcast where we deep dive into the intersection of business and sustainability. And we are your hosts and the founders of Dandelion Branding, Court and Og. And today we are joined by Joanne Flinn, who is an author of Greensight, as well as the chairwoman of the ESG Institute. They are working on advancing the transition to a net zero economy while they advocate for social and governance equity and justice. Love the work that you're doing. And you do this through your one-day ESG programs for directors and advisors. So they want to help companies start to make sustainable choices. It's incredible work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here. That's the real pleasure.
Absolutely. So, Joanne, could you tell us...
The pleasure's ours.
Absolutely. Yes, the pleasure is all ours. So let's jump into it. So can you tell us the number one thing that you want folks to know about ESG requirements for business?
The number one thing that I would really love people to realize is that as much as this is about the future that we will have, but most importantly, it's about the lives that each of us is going to have in the very near future. And as business people, it's the fact that we get to make day-to-day choices that really can make such a huge difference over time that if I had to get it down to like one really sort of simple phrase, which I know that you here do, is, the power of the storytelling. If we put a little small investment in today, if we plant that seed today, we've got things that will be able to grow. I was working with an executive earlier in this week. Oh, it's so big and it's so difficult. There was like, well, it is and it isn't, but mostly it's like,
right.
If you go and plant the seeds today and keep watering them, then you actually are in the place that you could actually have a forest in a while. If you do nothing today, you will not have the forest in a while. You will not have the garden.
Right.
In 12 months, if you plant the seeds today, you've got the possibility of something that you can have to harvest in the next 90 days.
Yep.
And it's realizing that it's when we sit there looking at it as being too big and overwhelming, we just make ourselves stomach.
Yeah, it's easy. It's analysis paralysis is the business term I've heard for that, where you're just looking at it and you're not really making any choices, and then you get totally overwhelmed, and then you don't know or can't know how to start just taking one step.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of go deer in headlights.
Yeah. Do you see that a lot when you start talking to people, or when people are coming to you? Are they already in that, like, I don't know where to go or what to do space?
We get that one, and a little bit, I think, is that when people tell the story of ESG and sustainability, they tell it in a way that it's so terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard not to have your body go into complete overwhelming fear, because, yes, when you add it all up, and I, like you have and I have, yes, it is terrifying, overwhelming, but I know that that's not the place that I have any reserve to take any action with.
So what action can you take is the first step, right? Of understanding.
It's almost even before that's what question of what action can I take. It's going, yes, there's a big set of pieces out there, but where do I want to play the game? Like, what I found was that because it's so big and overwhelming, we created 5 different archetypes. 5 different types of ways that people could respond to it, just to try and stop it from being this massive, massive, huge thing into, what am I? Am I a company that just wants to observe and watch? And that can be a really smart move if you don't think there's going to be any change to your business and there's no expectations from your customers. And you don't think there's going to be any change in your business environment for a while. So you don't actually have to think, and for some industries and businesses, okay, that could be really true. But, or you mentioned, earlier that you're in Norway at the moment. And, Courtney, with what you were saying in the U.S., and where I am, because I'm physically in Asia at the moment, is regulations are changing and customer expectations are changing. And so, that observer position, while it's one way of operating, it's not a safe position to operate from.
Not for very much longer, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like if you're a business person, you know how long it takes to build anything and to get things in place to be able to do things, right? It's not like, oh, something's happening and so you can snap our fingers and all of a sudden, miracles have occurred. I keep going, where's the fairy godmother?
Yeah. Despite how hard we've tried.
I know. It takes time and it takes effort. And, many business people invest time in their career or they invest time in the business to build it. And that time, it's like, what's that lead time? Like, I remember someone saying to me, Joanne, if you want a baby in 9 months, you better get pregnant today. And I thought it was the absolute most horrific analogy. I was like, oh my God, talk about, But it's also true in that in 9 to 12 months, we're going to have such a different regulatory framework, particularly for anybody who is in Europe and for anyone whose business wants to do business in Europe or anyone whose business does business with someone who does business in Europe.
Yep.
That this is like, get started now because then you can stay in business.
You can't ignore it. I think what's really poignant there is not just business owners in Europe. Our business is based in Europe. We're thinking about this. We're an agency, so we're a little less strict in there. But anybody that wants to work with someone in Europe, and that's everyone. That's every big major player. Our world is getting smaller and smaller. So you have to watch. You have to watch out for that.
Yeah, and that which means that as a business person or someone thinking about their career, it means having an understanding of what this actually means. Because I was talking with one group and they go, like, Joanne, we're all over carbon. I'm going, yeah, how come you're not talking about methane? Yeah. And they literally had that look on my face like, Joanne, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
A whole bunch of other pieces that just go into the greenhouse gases. And then there's waste and it adds up. And all these pieces play, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And on the methane topic, it's hardly ever talked about, even now in the circles. Like, it's so much more impactful. Just a little PSA. Talk about methane too. That's a big one.
Yeah. And the other piece that I notice in this one is there's so much attention around the heating and the greenhouse gas side that, and the environmental side of things, which is significant. It's whether it is now on the weather and the impact of was huge. But I know the European construct and regulations that globally businesses around the world are going to stay connected with that or to stay working with a customer who does trade into Europe. So much of that's also about the S. It's about the social impact that their business has.
Yeah.
Which is, really why, it's E and S, and then the G is in the governance. Are we making decisions that allow us to do the right thing to stay in business?
Do you find that people that come to you for support are more focused on environment or more focused on social, and then you're pushing them to make a more balanced decision-making structure?
At the moment, a lot of people are starting off on the environment side. That's sort of the piece that's coming at them the most visibly. Mm-hmm. And then as we go through it, and so the reason why we ended up developing the master classes and the ESG certification programs were really about people going like, oh, like we're just saying, oh, it's more than this one thing. It's like, yes, it's a system, but once you get a picture of how the system interacts, you can say, oh, okay. It's a bit like recipe, like you want the different, those are all the different ingredients. Oh, those are the techniques I need to put together. Oh, okay. But, when you first start off and it's like, oh my God, that just feels a little bit big and overwhelming. How the pieces come together. It's like, oh, it's manageable, but it's getting through that sort of first information hurdle. So, we worked with a lot of companies to something like, well, what does it actually mean? How would your decisions change? So, like I mentioned, the observer sort. And then there's a group that we call the pledgers, who are the ones who, you'd probably guess what a pledger's like. You're doing something fabulous.
They say, we're going to do this by 2050. We're going to do this by 2030.
And not doing an awful lot right now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Probably be the entirely sorts that you wouldn't have on your program because you're active before actually doing things.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, exactly. But, there's a bundle of people out there, and, those are the ones that get pulled up for greenwashing and other sorts of things. That is, in essence, what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then we found that, and so that one people usually get their head on pretty easily with like you just is like, okay, yeah, we see those ones. And then there's the compliers who are doing the right things to be in the right place, but they're treating it as a company compliance thing, which sounds really dull. And what I found over the years is when anybody does stuff in compliance, you do just enough.
Yeah.
But you don't see what else is possible to create real value, to create greater impact, and therefore get any growth or upside for this especially a survival level thing. But it's doing things, and those that have done a bit more are often the people that, are in that greenwashing category, because they don't really realize that what they've done is actually adding up. And then you get to the ones that are serious transformers, who are really doing pieces that do add up, that are creating different opportunities, that are creating different levels of impact. We used to just stop at the 4 profiles. And then we found that then there was another one in the transformer category, which we now call definers. And they're the ones, these are super exciting sorts, because they're the ones that are going like, well, how do we really define a long-term sustainable future? So they're very much more designed to be circular economy, regenerative, and building that kind of capacity already, which, the good thing is there are some companies that actively out there, and they're like the lighthouses for everybody to learn from.
We've definitely talked to a few on the podcast. That's cool. That final little definer thing make me feel really exciting that this is a new thing. You can become the trendsetter in the sustainability business world. Cool. Wonderful. So now I think that it's time for us to ask our favorite question on this show. But before I do that, I want to remind our audience to like and subscribe, to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our inspiring sustainability stories. We are here the first and third Wednesday of every month. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, now Joanne, what is the role that you and the ESG Institute plays in creating a more sustainable future?
So we talked about those 5 different profiles. So the role that we play in creating a more sustainable future is like being the coach to those different profiles to say, how can you lift your game? How can you take what you're doing up that next level so that your business will prosper, that you will be sustainable from a business point of view. You're profitable, you'll last, and you'll be able to create the greater impact. So, do either of you follow rugby?
No.
That's totally cool. Come on. The only reason why I follow rugby is that my dad's favorite sport. And so the best way as a kid to be able to get a cuddle was to cuddle up with him while he was watching rugby.
That's fair. Yeah.
My dad was one of these hyperactive, busy kind of sportsmen. About the only time he could ever catch him sitting and relaxing was, sports afternoons. So as a kid, that was where I got my cuddle time. So I learned about rugby, literally cuddling up with my dad.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned during that was that rugby is a game, it's played by largely pretty big guys, and they could tackle each other. And they could do what was called a neck tackle, which means you have a very big guy throwing themselves and their arm around someone else's neck to throw them to the ground. You like that. You just like the visual on that one, which led to all sorts of people become, quadriplegics and paraplegics, really not, funnily enough, the kind of outcome that's fairly obvious, but not a really good outcome. The sports literally hit a point where they said, this is not the game we want to be. We need to lift the game. That kind of outcome's not an acceptable outcome. We're seeing the damage it's causing. So they changed the rules. So you can't tackle people around the neck. It had to be shoulders and below to reduce the risk.
Yeah, because rugby, they wear a lot less padding than American football.
None.
Yeah.
A lot less padding as they don't wear padding. They wear shirts.
Zero. Yeah.
Very much. But they don't wear any padding, and helmets really you wusses having to wear all that padding. So it's a super, you're talking about full contact sport. This is real contact sport. And therefore the damage levels. And now they're talking about lifting the game again. They're going that we're seeing people 30 years on are having the concussion they had when they're, the repercussion implications. And so what they're doing now is
so bad
changing the rules, because they're going like, we thought that was okay, we've improved, but it's still creating too much damage. So lifting the game. And what I look at, like with these different ones, is what we're doing at the ESG Institute is helping businesses lift their game from one way that was considered fine in the past, but we now know the damage that it creates. So we're going like, okay, let's lift the game.
I love that. And the reason why I love that and the way you put it is because it doesn't give judgment for past decision making on different data. Like 10 years ago, ESG was a completely different world than it is today. The data we had access to, I think the data people like up top had access to was still pretty much like, we better stop doing this. But the general public and the average business owner didn't have access to the deep sustainability information. We didn't when we started. We're only 6 years in, and we've seen an explosion in the data where we have access to the information, the regulations, the changes that are possible, the businesses that are popping up all over the world that are making these differences. Completely different ball game now. So I really appreciate that what you're doing is starting from today's information and not going, 20 years ago, you did this dumb stuff. You know, you're like, good job growing from the decisions you made 20 years ago.
Most people don't want to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily know, as you said, there's things that we know now that we didn't know then, or there's things that we know now where we're going, God, if I had have known what that meant then. I mean, I can even just think back, like in our personal, like I just think back in my personal life. There's some things like, oh, well, hindsight.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but now I know, maybe, you know, let's go and do some things a little bit different, because it'll just be that much easier and better process.
Yeah. Learning and growing, and really great way to be. So what do you think the biggest misconception around changing your business or adhering to new requirements is, and how can storytelling and education around that change that misconception?
It's a twin misconception that I find, and this is where I think storytelling is super powerful, is a lot of people think that it's going to be super expensive. And, you know, when things are super expensive, and, you know, the reality is most of us have budgets that we have to stick to. You know, money is, you know, something that needs to be careful. So, you know, the idea of just going like, I got to go and do something that feels like it's a massive amount of money is just seriously off-putting for sensible reasons. And yet the pieces, it's like any story, it grows piece by piece. And, you know, it's when you kind of have a sense of the arc that you want to take the story in, the right next pieces start becoming far more obvious and meaningful. And the story of, you know, most stories are stories of journeys. They're stories of, there's a place I want to get to. There's challenges that I'm facing. There's things that I'm discovering. There's fabulous companions that I made in the journey. There's a new challenge that we didn't get, that I hadn't realized when I started off. I mean, like this journey of sustainability and ESG is, you know, in some ways, you know, like you could completely call it like the hero's journey or the heroine.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, let's call the heroine as we can, right?
Yeah.
Relabel it. If we start in despair, now, eventually that call hits, and it's like, you know, wow, I do have a choice to do something that's different and greater.
Yeah.
That misconception of it needs to be super expensive, where it's like, yeah, well, it's little pieces by little pieces building up to the bigger thing, which is not glamorous, and yes, there's challenges, but in the space of it's a journey, it's a story that we're going on together, then it's, you know, like I talk to my clients and people that are in the programs and going, like, when we see this as an adventure, it's a really different experience. So then when we see it as a horror movie.
100%.
Yeah, you know,
we can see it like a Stephen King book, you know, it's like kind of horror, but actually it always ends up good.
This is part of the piece that I found over time in this one is like, when you look like the really big picture data, and it's like, oh my God, you know, it's so bad. And yes, more should have been done and could have been done. Okay. And then I realized was that 30 years ago, as this was just sort of beginning to move out of the super, super tiny era and again, a slightly bigger audience, the work that's been done over the last 30 years has moved us from a world that by and large looked like we were looking at 7 to 8 to 9 degrees Celsius changes over the long term into one that is looking conceivably in a 2 to 4. Still not enough, right? But quite a significant improvement.
Yeah. And when you think about it like that, whoa.
Yeah.
A lot of impact. Yeah.
Wow.
Just going lots of little pieces are really adding up. And this is the piece where, and particularly the power of the stories that you help people be able to see and share and tell. It's it adds up. It's making a difference. Because you can see it. Yes, it's not where, if we're talking say using Lord of the Rings. Nice multi-part book, right?
Yeah.
It's long. It's there's a few more chapters to go. Another volume or two ahead of us.
Yeah, and we might get to Mordor. You don't know.
And even get back to the Shire.
How lovely would that be?
It would be pretty amazing. The thing is, it's entirely possible. I was working with one organization about 18 months ago, and with the 5 different profiles, what we've done is we've developed roadmap so people can go, I'm currently an observer, but I want to move to this other profile. What would it look like? What would it take? How do I do it? What we realized was that, if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you can afford all the PhDs. Most companies are not. And so we got a bunch of the PhDs together and then simplified it down into human language and business reality. And so, okay, this is actually what it would look like. If you're following this roadmap, actually it's doable. And we've had people come in with no background whatsoever, just business leaders going okay, I need to get my head around this one. And in about 2 days, in a slightly longer program, they've gone okay, I've got it and I know what I need to do. And then we can move from observer into a complier in about 2 years.
Wow. And you just help them with that roadmap. And is this the programs that are on the ESG Disclose?
You can start people off with what we call an introductory or a foundation program, because we found that, to part of what you're talking about before, that just if we don't have an idea what the concepts are, why we're doing things doesn't make sense. And then once people have got that foundation, then they go, now I get what the roadmap's doing for me. Oh, I can see why I'm doing that. Now this is what I will do. And so that roadmap's step 2. And then step 3 is how do you keep moving? Most of us don't need PhDs in this. We just need some practical pieces that go, okay, this is what you can do next. And then, we're not too distant future. You go oh my God, it's adding up and we're here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
More. That's really incredible that you're kind of making the information more accessible to folks that, aren't at the PhD level. I think that's what's so necessary in kind of breaking down that barrier and getting more and more folks involved in the movement. Yeah.
When we don't know where to start, it's overwhelming. And if we don't know what to do next, we go and pick up something else we do know how to do. And so we created the roadmaps, from a really practical point of view. It was we figured once we'd worked out how to do it, well, why not make that something that other people could do so that they could?
Brilliant.
And then frankly, vested self-interest, it means we're all more likely to have a cooler, greener, fairer future, which will just be an awful lot more pleasant to live in.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, if folks want to learn more, if folks want to potentially get involved or take some of the courses, how can they find you?
2 super practical ways. I'm on LinkedIn as Joanne Flinn, so as a human being, I'm easy to find. And if you're interested in the courses, the ESG Institute, so the-ESG-Institute.com, and that's a really easy way to access more information about the courses and other programs that we offer.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a really wonderful chat. I feel super inspired by the positivity that you bring.
Thank you for having me. It's just delightful to be here with you and to connect with other people who are out inspiring.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.